Hey, good evening, folks. Welcome to the pre-show where we're just getting everything ready. And I just pulled one of these little Cokes out of the fridge down here. I get these little ones. I like them because I always throw away half cans of pop. But he was partially frozen, and I left it sitting on my desk here about 10 minutes ago. Something's playing back at me. There we go. And so it was doing the slow bubble from the freeze, and I got a big puddle on my desk. Hey, Susie Q. How you doing? What, sweetie? I know. I got it. I see it. That's Susie Q. She's the only one there yet. David Otness, good to see you. So... I see it, baby. Thank you. Hey, Matt Finn. You don't have to point at it every time, sweetie, and reach across the desk. There's no battery charge on it. That's why it's plugged in right here. If you go up to Mom and Dad's room and plug it in, you can use it up there. Let's see. We got about 2 minutes left, 2.5 minutes. Let's see if this is all ice still. Not all ice. I left that sitting on my desk because it was ice, and it was frozen in the little fridge down here, and slushy. And I just noticed after about 10 minutes it was bubbling up all over. The slow bubble up because it's frozen. I don't know why. I don't understand the physics of that. I could if I thought about it, but why frozen sodas should bubble up after they start to thaw. So there you go. Well, I'm sorry to hear that. So I am truly. All right. So we got a couple minutes left, 1.5 minutes left before we go live. Gotta make sure here I need my elbow free. Thank you. Not pushing you out of the way, just pushing you out of the way. And I'm going to bring that sound way down. There, we're set to go. I'm going to put on the banner and our big banner. There we go. So there it is, folks. So how you doing, Ro? You got about a minute before we go live.
I didn't have any more of my phones on Straight Talk.
Yeah, we'll get it figured out. She broke her phone. They walked up to the little store to get a slushie, sisters, and she dropped her phone and shattered it. So she's without a phone. She was weeping. Her whole life is gone. You're getting a call and you can't turn it on? Push your button and see if it answers for you. Okay, folks, we're going to go dark. Exit this tragedy and go dark. Be back in a few seconds with the start of the show. Hang on.
Intrepid radio program with Scotty Roberts. Intelligent talk.
Are you looking for a really awesome and amazing graphic designer? How about an illustrator or a photographer? This is Rainey Roberts, and I wanted to tell you how you can get my designer, illustrator husband, Scotty Roberts, to work for you on your project. Do you have an awesome self-published book but no cover, or even worse, a cover that really sucks? Do you need a kick-ass logo for your company or some f***ing awesome graphic designs for your ads or website? Then get in touch with my husband for the best f***ing awesome kick-ass design and illustration. He knows his stuff, and he's been at this for more years than I've been alive. Go to ScottAllenRoberts.com. That's Scott with 2 T's, ALANROBERTS.com to take a look at his online portfolio of work, or call 651-468-8115. Now go out and kick some ass with some kick-ass graphic design.
Hire my dad, so he can take me to Disneyland.
You're listening to the Intrepid radio program with Scotty Roberts. Intelligent Talk.
Hey folks, welcome to the program. This is me, Scotty Roberts. This is my show, the Intrepid radio program, right here on the Odyssey Radio Network, and that's ODYSY radio.com. Come on over here, all the goodness. You can also watch the video simulcast in 4 different places, 3 of them on YouTube. 3 of them on Facebook, 1 of them on YouTube. That's youtube.com/Scotty Roberts. You can go over there right now and catch the chat room where everybody's already talking up a storm. Meet the fellow Intrepids and enjoy yourself over there. While you're there, like the broadcast, give it a thumbs up, and subscribe if you're not subscribed. And if you'd like to become a member, just click the little join button. It'll tell you how. So I want to thank you all for being here. Thank you for giving me your time, for showing up here. Yeah, the YouTube one is the fun one, said Sarah Yusuf. I agree. That's where everybody shows up. You can chat over in the Facebook ones, but not everybody in the YouTube sees the Facebook. So, or can see the Facebook. It's not set up that way. So you can go to any place you want. Hey, Dave Potter, Uncle Dave, how's your back? I know he woke up today, threw out his back, and so he's going to be laid up for a few days before he can get in to see his chiro. Hi, Rowan. What you doing back there, munching on pickles behind me on the radio, live?
The song won't shut off, and I can't do anything about it.
I'm sorry. I don't know what to do. You got to pull the battery. Let's talk about this when I'm not doing this, okay?
Headphones don't even work.
She dropped her phone, and her phone is now dead. So it rings, and songs play. And knowing her friends, if they don't get an answer, they keep calling back over and over and over again. Hey, Rainey.
Hi, I'm going to interrupt because I'm really irritated with kids. Did Dad invite you over here?
Yeah. I live
Did
here.
you
No.
invite them over here?
I did not.
You need to go. This is Dad's thing. Dad wants respect. Dad wants quiet.
There you go. There's Mom's voice.
People want to listen without having kids interrupt all the time. So go unless you've been invited.
I live here.
I know you live here.
You just hate me!
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we all hate her.
And then, Scotty, my suggestion would be to you in this new place we're moving. There's that back corner. That might be a perfect freaking office for you.
Maybe with an egress window.
Have 2 doors that people would have to go through, and it would be quiet and silent.
Scintillating radio, isn't it, folks? I prefer the 28 by 28 foot room for our offices, because this one's only, what, maybe 22, 23 by 14.
I have no idea.
So there you go. The big rainy. I took a measurements yesterday when we were over there.
I just am gonna tell you, if it's a co-office,
Yep.
and you don't have a door you can shut, not saying
There's that
I'm gonna shut the
possibility.
door
Yeah.
upstairs. If you want this to be a private show without kids interrupting and the whole family being
That'd be
in it
fine. That'd be fine
every
with me.
day. The back,
I'm cool with that.
the back where you can shut.
How about you folks? You want to vote on it?
Yeah, you want to vote. You want the family every night. Although shooting Scotty on air was awesome.
Yeah, that was.
There's all that good stuff.
Or do you want Rainey to yell at Scotty a lot? We go with what Ma says, right?
What Ma says goes.
Yeah. She ain't the boss of me. I just wanted you to know that.
What was that?
Ow, ow. Nipple pincher.
All right.
I got a purple nipple.
All right,
I
yes.
don't know what your show topic was for tonight, but this
Pompeii.
is not it.
Pompeii and weird artifacts found at Pompeii.
Cool. Well, have fun.
I
I
will.
would say I'm going to keep the kids out of it, but I've got my own stuff. I
The
need you
kids
to
are
do
okay as
right
long
now.
as they don't just invade.
like that. Go away.
Yeah. I'll call them over if I want them over. Familial interludes are okay on this show, folks. I know this is amazing radio right now. You're getting a lot of information. But this is my family's right here in the same room. So what can I do?
In 20
I
to-
kind of like the family interruption, says Uncle Dave.
20 to 25 years from now, when my kids are calling us to say, our kids are calling us to say, my kid's being an asshat, and they don't do this and they don't do that. I'm
The
gonna be like,
unspoken
"Hey."
was in 25 years when my husband's dead and my kids are calling.
Our kids are calling to say my kids are being jerk turds and they're not.
Hey, Spirit
listening."
Heart.
It's gonna be, guess what? You're gonna watch this episode, and you're gonna see exactly how you were and how you deserve 10 times.
That's
Dad.
right. Yeah, when you guys have kids and you complain to us about your kids, I'm going to show you these videos. That's what Mom just said. So there you go. So everybody, so
Having kids when you're 18, is that what you just said?
when you're 18,
When I'm 18, I'm an adult.
enjoy your
not
life
having
now
kids.
then.
At
Enjoy
18.
your life now. So
Oh my god. Okay, have fun. Bye.
oh, hey,
Bye.
hey, I love you.
Love you too.
Mm. So I will say this, as I was starting to say, Rowan dropped her phone and it cracked. It just split all over the place. Okay, why don't you go in your room? You'll be okay. You got a TV, you got a laptop, and home. Don't throw up. Oh, you were slurping. You were choking. I'm sorry. You couldn't weep because your choking was preventing you from weeping. You got to laugh about it. Life is full of phones breaking and things like that.
My whole life, I had 117 phones.
I know. It was your whole life. It was your whole life. I get it. I know.
And I
So-
finally had the cutest guy on my Snapchat, and now it's all gone.
You had the cutest guy on your Snapchat. Oh, it's gone now. I'm sorry. I am so sorry to hear that. It'll be fine.
I left my
We'll
phone
get you a nice,
outside.
cheap phone before school, and you'll be able to communicate with everybody.
I left my phone outside.
You left it outside. Well, it's not working,
Well,
so.
the song won't stop playing. I was about to chuck it at the wall.
All right.
I hit it on the wall and flipped through, and I messed something
I
up.
know. I know. We might have been able to extract data from it by my hookups here until you threw it against the wall and it started doing other wonky things. So that's control your passions. So yeah, Ron, we'll get it fixed. As Uncle Dave just said, we'll get it fixed. If not, we'll get her an inexpensive phone through our carrier that'll
Can I
cost
smash
$16.
it with a hammer if we don't
So-
get it fixed?
I don't know yet. We'll see if we can go extract all your photos. Okay, I need you to go. As much as I love you.
If you loved me, you would buy me a new phone.
Oh yeah, there it is. There's the measure of my love. The price tag of my love is a new phone.
The cheapest phone is $20.
Okay, thank you. There you go. Detox night. Yeah. Hey guys, that's enough now. Seriously. I'm unmoved by that. So I need you guys to keep quiet now. Go in your room and play. Matt Finn says life without a phone might do her some good. Yeah, it just might. That's I told her, I said, I grew up without a cell phone. We had the phone on the wall with the spirally long cord that went 30 feet. And that's as mobile as your phone got. the big, long, stretchy, coily cord from the wall. And once you got to the end of that, you lacked mobility. So, yeah, whatever, says Susie Q, LOL. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, phones sometimes would be nice. Wouldn't it be nice to have a society without them for a while? I could do with a big brownout of everything. I want to see the grid go down for a while. No internet, no phones, no nothing. And so we could have a new Pompeii. We could have death to our society because nobody has a phone. So there you go. All right. Wonderful introduction to the show. I want to thank everybody who's here. We don't have as many live listeners right now. Maybe people got a little tired of the family stuff going on. So let's move away from it now. No visuals. Said Brian Parker. I'm not sure what you mean. In the show tonight or with the brownouts? Yeah. No broadcasting either, if we have one of those. So Pompeii, those kids had issues too. Yeah. They didn't have, Mom, I broke my clay figurine. It was my best friend, my best action figure, my clay gladiator. And I dropped it and it broke. So immortality. Yes, Pompeii picks. I don't have any new picks for tonight, but I have some interesting information. And there's a Smithsonian article that Daniel Craig sent me that I'm probably going to read this one to you rather than just glean some information from it. But before we do, there are 15 things that are bizarre things that most people don't know about the bodies that are preserved at Pompeii. And I wanted to kind of hit this. Now, we all know, we reviewed last night, 79 CE, or Common Era, or AD, Vesuvius erupted and buried Pompeii and Herculaneum. And it was buried from the world by ash, between pumice and ash, and it was all but forgotten for nearly 1,500 years. But that changed in 1738 when excavation workers discovered the site preserved beneath dust and debris. And then in 1860, Italian archaeologist Giuseppe Fiorelli, he took charge of the site and began a proper excavation. And Pompeii recognized the soft ashes. Fiorelli recognized the soft ashes on the site, and that they were actually cavities. And of course, as we all know by now, and has become old news, they started making plaster casts of these much later, and of course CT scans now, and that's nearly 150 years later. And new archaeological discoveries are constantly refining our beliefs about the ancient world. And I think it's like me saying, when I first discovered that the artists at Pompeii, I looked at the fine art quality of the paintings. I didn't think that they did that kind of work 2,000 years ago, but of course they did. And so it's the same thing. You start learning more about a culture. You learn more about the ancients and what they did. Now, here's some little known facts. We know that to create the preserved bodies of Pompeii, Fiorelli and his team poured plaster into soft cavities in the ash, which were about 30 feet beneath the surface. And these cavities were outlines of bodies, and they retained their forms despite the soft tissue decomposing. And the plaster filled in the spaces formerly occupied by the soft tissue of the human body. And a common misconception is that the plaster bodies are empty, but the cavities that the bodies left were not shells in the ash waiting for the plaster. In fact, there were soft spots that still held the bones of the cadavers. Cadaver, I always hated that word. It sounds cold and sterile. They were the bones, which is what they are. They're the bones of the bodies that died and decomposed there. And the bones were still there. They're still in these plaster casts, housed inside them, the skeletal remains. So when the plaster filled the soft ash, the bones were enclosed, and the bodies of Pompeii are even more lifelike than they appear. And there's pictures that go along with this article that are just stunning. And I showed most of these kind of things last night, and I don't want to just repeat the photos that we had up last night. Uncle Dave, I saw the cutest gladiator, and now I'll never get his name. That's his response to the destruction at Pompeii. So, Bobby, do you like gladiator movies, little Davy? So, surviving until the age of 10 in Pompeii would have been a feat when you were a child, because children often died from infectious diseases, lack of proper treatment, and diseases leave their mark in the enamel of the teeth. So archaeologists have insight into some of the most common causes of death among children of Pompeii because their skeletal remains were there. Syphilis ranks as the top killer of children in Pompeii in 79 AD. And there's telltale signs of the bones of a pair of young male twins that point to congenital syphilis. Congenital, passed on from the parents. And although many scientists previously believed that Columbus and his sailors brought syphilis back to Europe after sailing to America, this proves the disease existed in Europe more than 1,000 years before the time of Columbus. So, what's Sarah saying here? It's interesting decomposition chemicals didn't distort the ash cast too much. Not too much. One thing you will note about the castings is, now, in a day and age where we take castings and people take castings of Bigfoot footprints, and you can even see the lines, like the fingerprints, only they're toe prints, and footprints. You can see that on some of those castings. Those kinds of details were lost. They're pretty general. You can see a face. You can kind of see what people looked like, but at the same time, you weren't really too sure. You know what? I'm gonna take a look at. I'm gonna put up one picture here, and I've got to. While we're talking about it here, I'm gonna bring it up and prep it so you can see it. Those of you, of course, who are on radio, you're not going to see this. But if you come on over to the chat room, you'll see it. Let's see. Let me find this. If I go into where I have all these pictures stored on my computer, I know this is scintillating as listening to my family complain about broken phones and things like that. But let's see. Let's find the Pompeii pictures I've got in here somewhere. All right. Part of the problem is my computer wants to. It shows everything in gray until you click on something. Then the list brightens up. So, all right. I'm gonna save one of these for you to take a look at here. Boom. I'm gonna put this in because I think this is a pretty stunning photo. We didn't see this one last night. It wasn't in the collection I showed you, or it might have been from a different angle. But I think you'll see what some of these plaster casts, what they're seeing. You even see the lines of clothing on the body in this one. And let's call this Pompeii child. All right. And I have to save it as a PDF because that's the only way it will take it. And that's why there's such a process to getting these pictures into the show. Let me bring this up for you. I have to go here and upload the file. And Pompeii is the folder. I know this is riveting radio right now, but here we go. All right. It's uploading now. So it'll just take a few seconds and it'll be here with us. But there were all kinds of diseases that took place. Among them, the top among them was syphilis. It ranks at the top. And that's all on the disease, and we're going to move into the hierarchy. Some of the bodies or the plaster cast will show hierarchy. Here, look at this now. This is the I'm going to take off the banner so you can see this better. There we go. This is the plaster cast of a child at Pompeii. And this is one of the children that was suffering from that had congenital syphilis. Now you can see when they poured the plaster in this mold, you look at the face, you can see the eyes. I don't know if the eyes were opened or if they were shut. They may have burned out. You can see the creases, the folds in the clothing that this child was wearing. You can see the fingers and the toes are missing, mostly because some of that soft tissue that just closed in. So there you go. That's one of the pictures that's available. I'm going to leave that up while I go into looking more into some of what they found in these bodies. They show a social hierarchy, and modern researchers have found skeletons in Pompeii that might indicate the social status of those who perished. In November of 2020, archaeologists found the remains of 2 men inside a side room of the Cryptoporticus, a covered gallery below a villa at the excavation site of Civita Juliana, just northwest of Pompeii. And one of the skeletons of a young man, about 18 to 25 years old, revealed a series of vertebral compressions, unusual in a young man of his age. And it suggested that he'd been doing hard labor and could have been an enslaved person. The second man, thought to be 30 to 40 years old, was found with the remains of intricate clothing, including a tunic and a mantle made of wool that suggested he could have been a wealthy man. There was a group of 54 bodies that were found in a basement storeroom of an agricultural depot. That's also of great interest to archaeologists and anthropologists. Although the victims hunkered down together in the space, they also arranged themselves among clearly divided lines. On one side of the room, the bodies were loaded with gold, jewels, and other signs of wealth. And on the other side of the room, the people had no possessions with them. Although scientists aren't certain about what this means, there are several possible explanations for the arrangement. Some people could have picked up their possessions and tried to run from the disaster, or maybe half of the people in the room were criminals who stole things on their way, which is highly unlikely. But it's also possible that people arranged themselves according to social status. In this room, slaves on that side of the room, and rich, wealthy people or commoners on this side. The position of the body, the casual position, tells how people might have died. Some of the researchers discovered some of the Pompeii bodies in the fetal position, and that's a common sign of suffocation. So many experts assume the victims died when hot gases roared through the city, but scientists also know that remaining pumice caused roof collapses that killed some Pompeians who remained indoors. But excavations also discovered bodies in relatively casual positions. So we looked at some of those pictures last night. And this led some scientists to believe that incredibly high temperatures from the eruption killed the Pompeians, not prolonged suffocation by ash. Some DNA survived in some of the skeletal remains, and it revealed spinal tuberculosis in this man. The body shows signs of pyroclastic surge death wave, of course, and we knew that's how many of these people died. After the initial wave of falling pumice and debris, the whipping heat tornadoes washed over the city and instantly killed everyone in the way that was left. And this natural phenomenon is called a pyroclastic surge. And according to this theory, the victims in the fetal position didn't end up that way because of a slow and drawn-out death. Instead, they were in what's called extreme cadaveric spasm, when the body's muscles instantly contract to form extreme from dehydration. And crack patterns in the skeletons lend further proof that the theory that the Pompeians died of incredible hint. They're also talking about, the timing might have been different on the eruption. I'm not so interested in that. Contemporary CT scans are correcting old assumptions about the bodies. People during the Victorian era loved a good drama. So when Fiorelli's team began piecing together the story of Pompeii, there were a lot of people that created stories for the bodies based on misleading evidence. There's the pregnant woman who was consumed by hot ash, and the embracing lovers known as the two maidens. But modern CT scans have debunked most of these kinds of stories. That poor pregnant woman wasn't pregnant, and she wasn't even a woman. The two maidens were both men, and we'll probably never know the true nature of their relationship. Were they slave master? Were they friends? Were they just two people who randomly ended up in the same place, hiding? The bodies, these castings, you know what they found from this? It proves that Pompeii was as diverse as modern-day New York City. We think of those ancient cities as being backwater, out of, like I thought about the paintings again. Well, of course they didn't have the technology to do that. But there's a body of Pompeii that's come to be known as the Celt from Gaul because of its unusually tall height and the unique manner of dress that he was wearing. I don't know if he was in a kilt, but probably not. But he was wearing something that was obviously a little more Northern European than Italy. And that suggests that the man could have come from somewhere north of Pompeii, quite a bit far north of Pompeii. And for a long time, many assumed the man was a slave that was captured by the Romans. But now we know that that might not be the case. As urban and cosmopolitan as Pompeii was in the first century, Pompeii was important a trade city as any, where merchants from across the entire Mediterranean lived and worked in Pompeii. And it'd be like a Singapore today or something like that. So experts have used bone analysis to determine the genetic makeup of Pompeii, and many agree the diversity was similar to modern cities like New York or London. You go to London nowadays, there is a great mixture. I know when I was there last, which was 17 years ago. Man, that's hard to believe. It was that long ago. But a lot of the population looked Eastern Indian and had heritage in India. But they were Londoners, and they spoke perfect English with a London accent. So people from Greece, Gaul, and other surrounding Mediterranean countries comprised the population. So this guy that they found that looked like that they're assuming might have been a Northern Gaul, Celt, just may have been. Or the other theory is that some of those fashion trends were trendy and they picked up in a cosmopolitan area of a city this size. So it's very interesting. The bodies disprove that all victims were sick and elderly. There were theories that everybody who was left behind were people that couldn't manage to get out of town. After the pyroclastic blow didn't happen right away. That came after the ash and the initial explosion. And the people were getting out of town. They were getting out of Dodge pretty fast. As Sarah said on the after show in the captain's cabin last night, that Pliny the Younger went back. He kept going back to get people, and he would tie a pillow over his head so he wouldn't get hit on the head with debris. So they were still going back in there. People of Pompeii might have been taller than we think. From looking at the preserved bodies at Pompeii, there's many researchers assume the residents of the city during that time were shorter than people today, but that might not be true. According to archaeologist Estelle Lazaire, measurements of long bones reveal that the ancient Pompeians were about as tall as the local population of today's Naples. And they were overall healthy thanks to they had overall, despite the congenital syphilis in children and the low mortality rate of young children, overall, Pompeians were a healthy breed, and they lived fairly healthy lifestyles. What's that say about having brothels everywhere? Must be healthy. So the Pompeians, they also had excellent dental hygiene. Many of the skeletons they found had intact teeth, and the teeth were in great shape. Out of the 1,500 of 2,000 bodies they found, 1,500 of them had and all these castings they've made and the bones they found. So it's very interesting. So in 2015, archaeologists began using the CT scans to analyze the bodies at Pompeii. One of the most remarkable finds is that the Pompeians had terrific teeth. They lived thousands of years before the advent of anything even resembling modern dentistry, but experts didn't find a single cavity in all the teeth they examined via CT scan. So at first glance, this is kind of shocking, but it actually makes quite a bit of sense. Mount Vesuvius erupted before processed sugar was invented, and the Roman diet was high in fiber and protein and fruits. And this diet, combined with the high levels of fluorine in the air and the water, made for mouths free of cavities. The bodies showed plenty of people that lived into old age. They indicate the strength and the importance of the Roman family networks. These were all over some of the big villas that had the paintings on the walls. And Pompeii, by the way, was a fairly affluent town. On one hand, the bodies of Pompeii demonstrate a high mortality rate of children under 10, but they also testify to the strength of the Pompeian family units. So according to anthropologist Fabian Cans, the fact that many Pompeians survived into adulthood despite the evidence of childhood diseases shows that parents and extended families provided a great deal of care for kids. And that means they spent a lot of time helping their children when they could have been focused on their own survival. So you can't say the same thing about all early societies. These CT scans that they used, they were developed especially for this. And so there's a lot of research you can do into this stuff. That's some of the stuff that came up as kind of the extraordinary finds. Now, there were also weird oddities. I've got this, I don't know that I want to drag Pompeii into a third day by bringing it into tomorrow, but I've got a lot of information. And it's something where I highly recommend going to YouTube or going to, I think you can go, if you've got Disney Plus, you can go to their history section, their Nat Geo section, and you can find a new documentary that was done within the last year on Pompeii, interviewing the archaeologists and so on. So there's a lot of good information out there. I've got this Smithsonian article that I thought might be interesting just to read parts of this article. But this article is all about buried by the Ash of Vesuvius. There are scrolls now that are being read for the first time in millennia. Remember when we talked and we've mentioned the library at Alexandria, the Library of Alexandria, that was destroyed almost the same time, 150 years maybe after the destruction of Pompeii. But there's a revolutionary American scientist. He's using subatomic physics to decipher 2,000-year-old texts from the early days of Western civilization. And what they're finding, they're able to kind of unroll some of these. But what happened was when the ash came down and the pyroclastic surge came through, it burned all these scrolls. It turned them into char. It's like a big chunk of charcoal. But they noticed some of these, when they first started noticing this, that there were scrolls that were wrapped up, but they couldn't unravel them. So they started doing CT scans, like doing brain scans and all the layers when you get that done. And they were able to, via a computer program they developed, to piece together all the words that were visible in all these rolls of char. And they're able to read some of the scrolls. The charred papyrus scroll that was recovered from Herculaneum, just a few miles away from Pompeii, that was also destroyed. In 12 trays mounted under glass, the scroll was physically unrolled in 1883, causing irreparable damage. But you can see the scrolls. Now, there's a whole story that they're writing here. Of course, this is an article for Smithsonian Magazine. There were dozens of rooms in Pompeii, or hutches. They're arrayed around a huge donut-shaped building. I'm sorry, where they're doing the scans. And there's a type of particle accelerator called a synchrotron, and it propels electrons to near light speed around its 500-meter long ring. And it bends them with magnets so they emit light, and the resulting radiation is focused into intense beams. And in this high-energy X-rays, which travel through each hutch, that red laser shows the path the beam is going to take. And a thick lead shutter, attached to the wall is all that stands between the scientists and a blast of photons 10 billion times brighter than the sun. So there's a diamond light source. And anyway, they start digitally unraveling these scrolls, which I think is an amazing thing. The scrolls represent the only intact library known from the classical world. It predates the destruction of the Library of Alexandria. It's an unprecedented cache of ancient knowledge. And most classical texts we know today were copied, and they were therefore filtered and distorted by scribes over the centuries. But these works came straight from the hands of the Greek and Roman scholars themselves. Yet the tremendous volcanic heat, the gases that was spewed by Vesuvius, carbonized the scrolls, turning them black into like hard lumps of coal. And over the years, various attempts to open some of them created a mess of fragile flakes that yielded only brief snippets of text. And hundreds of papyri were therefore left unopened, with no realistic prospect that their contents would ever be revealed and ever be able to be read. And it probably would have remained that way except for this scientist named Brent Seals, a director of the Center for Visualization and Virtual Environments at the University of Kentucky, of all places. You don't think of the University of Kentucky when you think of high-tech X-rays of ancient charred scrolls. Seal is in the control room. He was watching intently, frowning with his hands in his pockets, and as this writer is saying. And there were several layers of this, and a section of the ancient Torah, the Hebrew Bible, found in the Byzantine-era synagogue in Ein Gedi. It includes verses from the beginning of Leviticus, this charred piece. And a wailing alarm sounded. This is the story. I don't want to read the story. Let's see. It's giving you a little biography on Seals and how he got to where he is. In 2000, he created three-dimensional computer models of the pages of damaged manuscripts, 11th century collections of saints' lives, Otho, then developed an algorithm to stretch them, producing an artificial flat version that didn't exist in reality. And when that worked, he wondered if he could go even further and use digital imaging, not just to flatten crinkled pages, but to virtually unwrap unopened scrolls and reveal texts that hadn't been read for 2,000 years in antiquity. And he said, he kind of nonchalantly said, I realized that no one else was doing this. So he began to experiment with medical grade computer tomography, a CT scanner, and all the things he took through. And then he scanned his first authentic object, a 15th century book binding thought to contain a fragment of Ecclesiastes from the Old Testament hidden inside. And guess what? It worked. And buoyed by this success, he imagined reading fragments of the Dead Sea Scrolls, all of this. And he went on and continued in this work. And he isn't the first to try these things. It was tried before. Not with this scientific technology, however. But somewhat 1754, a Vatican priest in a conservator named Antonio Piaggio dreamed up a new scheme. He glued gold beater's skin, a calf's extremely thin yet tough intestinal membrane, to a scroll's surface, then used a contraption involving weights on strings to ease it open. Now, artists watched this excruciatingly slow process and copied any exposed writing in pencil sketches known as a disegni. And many of the flaky outer layers of the scrolls were removed before the inner portion could be unwound. The papyrus often tore into narrow strips. And there are diagrams of his machine. It's pretty cool stuff when you think about it. So, scholars searching the transcribed fragments for lost works of literature have largely been disappointed, and a few pieces of Latin works were discovered, including part of the Annals by Quintus Ennius, a 2nd century BC epic poem about the early history of Rome. Oh, this is something else where they're looking in other places. So, I find it fascinating that at his lab in Kentucky, Seals subjected the papyrus scraps to a battery of non-invasive tests, and he looked for trace elements in the ink, anything that might show up in a CT scan, and he discovered tiny amounts of lead, perhaps contamination from a lead inkwell or a water pipe. It was enough for the Institut de France to give him access to 2 intact papyri, blackened sausage-shaped artifacts that Seals nicknamed Banana Boy and Fat Bastard. Those are the names he gave the 2 papyrus scrolls. And he arranged for a 600-pound high-resolution CT scanner to be sent from Belgium. And he was disheartened to find that the ink inside was not intact and it was invisible. And so what was worse, the scans showed the layers inside the scrolls to be so carbonized that in many places there was no detectable separation between them. Well, he goes on and he keeps working on this. He spent 2012 and 2013 as a visiting science at the Google Cultural Institute in Paris. He was chasing new ideas for reading the carbonized ink. And he also was waiting for the data, but the files didn't arrive. In 2015, Moselia's group published the results without him, which kind of sucked. When you do all that work, then somebody else takes the work and publishes it. Jeez, how disheartening is that? News stories around the world reported that the Herculaneum scrolls had been deciphered at last, but in fact, Mosella had claimed to read only letters, and some scholars are cautious about even those, not least because the group didn't publish enough information for others to replicate the analysis. And so they were seeing ghosts, is what Seal says. The researchers who were without software to model the surfaces were seeing ghosts of text, random patterns in the papyrus, fiber structure that just happened to look like letters. And he's now convinced that the phase contrast tomography alone isn't sufficient to read the Herculaneum scrolls. So it goes on, and he finished preliminary analysis. He keeps going on with this. I want to cut to the chase of this. Seals and other colleagues scanned the scroll fragments using a handheld 3D scanner called an Arctic Space Spider. I might as well pack my bags and go home, he said, if this scanner, the grinding noise of the scanner says that this isn't working. After Seals returned to Kentucky, he and his colleagues spent months mapping out all of the available 2D images onto 3D templates produced by the Arctic Space Spider. And just this past March, they returned to Oxford to present the results on a big screen of packed conference room. At such high resolution, the charged papyrus resembled a dark brown mountain range as seen from above, with lines of text snaking all over the ridges and the peaks. There was a gasp from the audience as Seal's student, Hannah Hatch, rotated the image and then zoomed into creases and peeked over folds, flipping seamlessly between high-resolution photographs, infrared images, and even the Desengi drawings, all matched up to the 3D template. So the audience was abuzz with questions, of course, and this article goes on and on and on. You can look for it on Smithsonian Magazine to find the article about seals and the work of the scrolls. And he successfully finally read the Herculaneum scrolls, which could trigger a new renaissance of classical antiquity, says Gregory Hayworth, a medievalist at the University of Rochester, New York. And so they were successful. We'd changed the canon, Hayworth says. I think the next generation is going to have a very different picture of antiquity. And this is a bit what we were talking about with Professor Bauer and Sarah last night. And Uncle Dave, you were there too, I think. And we were talking about how the paradigm shifts when we gain more information about things. So Seals has been enhancing the technique. He's still negotiating with curators at Oxford, Naples, and Paris for access to intact scrolls. And he's surmounted huge technical hurdles for the complex political challenge of navigating the gatekeepers, winning beam time at particle accelerators, and lining up funding can very occasionally puncture optimism in something like this. How does a guy like me, he says, make all that stuff happen all at once? And he said in one such moment, he shrugged and he looked around him. It's more than a computer scientist is really capable of doing. He says, I refuse to accept that it's not possible, he said. At every turn, there's been something that opened up. And reading a complete, intact scroll at last, he went on, would be like returning home to your family who've been waiting all along for you to do the thing you started. So this is some of the interesting work that's going on to unravel the scrolls that they found at Pompeii and Herculaneum. It's really amazing stuff. And we're drawing to kind of the end of the radio portion of this show. I'd have about 5 extra minutes if we didn't have all the familial nonsense at the beginning. It's not nonsense. It's my life. It's my life, folks. I have to admit, this is my show. What you see here is me. This is what you get. You see my wife. You see my family. Sometimes it's chaos over here. Sometimes it's just fun. Sometimes it's like, well, that was scintillating live radio, right? Not. So I've only been to the Smithsonian once, Michelle Canham-Free. And I have to say, I was on not a business trip, but I lived down in Lynchburg, and weekly I'd go up to Baltimore to visit. One of our biggest clients was Marriott Hotels. And I'd go up there, and I took time one day while I was up there. I had a short meeting, lasted 10 minutes. And rather than turn around and make the 3.5-hour drive back right away, I went over to the Smithsonian. And this was in the early 80s that I was employed down there and lived down in Lynchburg. And you know what they were showing at the Smithsonian? I had to go find it. It was the MASH exhibits from the television show. The sets from the television show were all set up at the Smithsonian for a special exhibit. And I went in to see those. I took a half an hour and then had to turn around and go back home. So I have to eat crab cakes when in Baltimore. That's like going to Boston and having to eat a lobster in Boston. I went and visited my old drill instructor from the Marine Corps in Boston after my stint. And he took me, we drove up to Maine to get lobster. So, yeah, the Smithsonian would be a great place to visit and take time. You could take a week with the family there and not see it all. So, anyway, there you go. Lobster in Boston? I thought it was baked beans. There's baked beans there too, I think. Boston gets it from Portland, Maine. So, there you go. So, folks listening on the radio, we've got about a minute. That's why I've strayed into non-committal territory, just talking about stuff. And I I really don't want to do Pompeii again tomorrow. There's more stuff to see, so I'm just going to advise you to go ahead and stick around for the captain's cabin tonight. We might hit that topic a little bit and give you some places where you can go and read up more and see more about all this stuff. It's amazing, this stuff. So, all right. So for the radio audience, I'm going to tell you, we're going to get out of here. Everybody else, if you want to stick around for the captain's cabin, stick around. So for now, radio, live long and prosper.
Join us every weeknight at 9 p.m. Central Standard Time, 10 p.m. Eastern. The Intrepid Radio Program, a Scotty Roberts Productions broadcast.
Are you looking for a really awesome and amazing graphic designer? How about an illustrator or a photographer? This is Rainey Roberts, and I wanted to tell you how you can get my designer, illustrator husband, Scotty Roberts, to work for you on your project. Do you have an awesome self-published book but no cover, or even worse, a cover that really sucks? Do you need a kick-ass logo for your company or some f***ing awesome graphic designs for your ads or website? Then get in touch with my husband for the best f***ing awesome kick-ass design and illustration. He knows his stuff, and he's been at this for more years than I've been alive. Go to ScottAllenRoberts.com. That's Scott with 2 T's, ALANROBERTS.com to take a look at his online portfolio of work, or call 651-468-8115. Now go out and kick some ass with some kick-ass graphic design.
Hire my dad, so he can take me to Disneyland.
Well, and avast. Welcome to the captain's cabin, folks. Glad you can be here and stick around for a bit. May not be here very long tonight. I don't think we'll do a full hour. But there you go, Pompeii. We hit that for a couple of days, and I think that's enough for now. Although you could we could talk about Pompeii for a month, every night for a month, and probably have new material. I think we should all just take a trip and go over there and see it. Wouldn't that be fun? I'd like to take Rainey to see Pompeii, and other sites in Italy as well. Italia. And so yeah, there's a lot to see over there, and there's a lot of information about this. Like I said, go over to, I think if you go to Disney Plus, I mentioned this. If you've got Disney Plus, I think you can find it in other places. It's a Nat Geo thing, but I think if you go over to, hey Sarah, I think if you go to Disney Plus, you can go to their Nat Geo section, and you'd be able to find this documentary. Hi Sarah, how you doing?
Hey Scotty.
So, what, sweetheart?
I know you're on Captain's cabin.
I know you know. I know you know that I know you know.
How come Sarah never shows her face?
Because she's horribly disfigured. She's an alien, and she burned herself with her spaceship coming in through the atmosphere.
No, she's not.
And so- and to think of something. So some people don't like to show their face. That's okay. She might have a good reason for it. We don't ask her, though.
I'm tall.
Yes, you are. So, sorry, Sarah. It's not polite to ask, but you got a 7-year-old blurting it out.
It's okay. It's all right.
So, that's why I came up with the horribly disfigured alien.
Oh,
story.
not too far off, but
So, oh, look, Uncle Dave's here. You can expound on that if you want. You are an alien? Uncle Dave, Sarah is just about to reveal that she is an alien.
Foreigner, yes.
Well, foreigner.
That type of.
You speak pretty good English for being one of them foreigners.
Well, I mean, I'm a citizen, so.
Okay, well, there you go. That always helps.
Yeah.
Always helps. Hey, I like that Star Wars tank top on you, Rainey. Come on over here and show people your cool Star Wars tank top. Whatever. I don't want to.
Whatever. I'm so.
Whatever.
You know.
Come on. Come on, Rainey. Just because I'm a guy.
Has the drama settled down?
Yes. Yes, pretty much. So, I got to tell you.
I was all willing to fix the phone until she started talking about the boy, and then I'm like, "Give me a hammer, I'll fix that." phone.
Yeah, I'll fix the phone forever. The phone's not fixable. It's got all those lines that are just constantly going up, but you can't even do anything. You can't see anything.
So
Thing
is
was
it
shattered.
one that has a SIM card in it, or is it older than
It's
that?
got a SIM card in it. Oh, there you
Yes.
go. Here's
She'll
what
be
it's
able to.
doing.
She'll be able
Here
to
you
save
go.
her data
Yeah.
That's what it's doing.
if she
Yeah.
stops smashing it against the wall. They'll be able to save her data.
Yeah, look at all the cracks. And so I told her after she threw it against the wall, I said, we might have been able to save your data. Maybe you just eliminated it all. But yeah, if they get the SIM card out of this, I think all her data is there. So that's good. We'll get her a cheapie that she can use. It'll still take a picture. That's funny. The first.
thing is, that phone's only $59.
Why don't you come over here and talk to me? I can't hear you.
$59 for that phone, so it's not.
I know.
It's not
Oh, this
like
phone?
Yeah.
Yeah. $59 for this brand new. This was a
Yeah.
used phone from Grandma. So,
We'll get it taken.
this was a Christmas present.
We'll
Randy
get it taken
corrected
care
me.
of.
Yeah, so she's probably bound
Okay.
for a detox night. So
Yeah, it was. I got to tell you, it was like horrible. She was laying on the floor, and I came out into the hallway, and I said, "Sweetheart, I realize that it's a problem for you, but your mom didn't die, your dad didn't die, your siblings didn't die. You're good." So there was a deep,
Yeah, but this
moaning
generation is so
cry.
attached to their phone.
I know.
It's
well, I mean, it comes to that, mental immaturity, because right now her world is her friends.
Yep.
Yep.
It's
and
And
they're
she
only
does.
connected by
She
phone.
will turn that phone on and carry it around all day with it connected to somebody all the
Yeah.
time. I always hear them
Even
talk.
when she's physically with her friends, they're still all connected together on the
Yeah.
phones.
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
like if you go out to eat, everybody's on their phone. They're not talking to each other across from
Yep.
the thing. But I mean,
Which was even-
I
take
went
my
out
phone
with
and
like
look
internet
longer.
for a couple days, and I felt like I went through a detox.
Oh yeah.
When you're in the mountains, and
Yep.
the internet goes out for a couple days, and it's like
Oh,
everybody in the
you're-
house was like, it was
So we're zeroing
like
in.
walking
You're
on- yeah.
in the mountains, eh?
I'm going to say something in Rowan's defense here. When we went on our
Yeah.
date, the first thing she did was take her phone and put it face down, and told me to take my phone and put it face down
That's
so
what
that we
do.
could talk during our date.
That's
That's
what
good.
we do with
Yeah.
the family when the family goes out.
Yeah, there's
Everybody
like
put your phones
some
down.
people they just take all their phones and put it on the breadbasket, and the first one who picks up their phone picks up the check.
Yep.
Oh, I'd be leaving my phone at so many restaurants.
When I was
I'll come back and
down
get it
with-
tomorroh. I'll get it tomorrow.
when
I don't want to
Sam
take
and I
any
were
chance
down
of
in
owing something.
Louisiana last year, working. we had the Mexican crew and the crew chief, and we'd all get together and eat with them and drink with them and stuff like that. And they would collect up everybody's phones in a basket at the beginning of whenever we were hanging out for a meal. He says, all the phones go in the basket. And so everybody had to turn in their phones and until we were done. So,
yeah, I mean, it's like also like the concept of having family dinner. I mean, nobody really sits together, every member of the family at the table, and it has dinner. It's like everybody's on their own schedule. So, I mean, it's
hey, Andrea Mulnix, good to see you over there in the chat room. I don't know if you're still there or not. She was married to the old rancher who has sadly passed away. But he was the guy that we were buying the ranch from. And so she owned the ranch with Mac, the old cowboy from Wyoming. And we moved off the ranch. And then after he passed away, she moved to Wyoming. So Wyoming or Montana? Can't remember. It's Wyoming, isn't it?
Stop shaking my desk.
Rainey? Andrea lives in Wyoming or Montana?
That was Montana.
Montana. There you go. We had a good psychic I know who's very good, said we needed to move to Montana.
Stop asking.
She said you should go west, Montana. So there's something for you in Montana, she said.
Called a Free America.
Free America, that's it. So Montana, said Andrea. Yeah, there it is. So she is happily remarried. Mac, the old cowboy, he passed away. God, it's got to be 10 years ago, something like that. And so she's remarried. They've got a ranch out on Montana. Come on out, she says. Yeah, we should. We really should. We need to go somewhere different.
So go ahead.
Yeah, go right ahead. Take us off this reverie.
My mind was just wandering. So I was thinking, say if we do have super volcanoes here or asteroid event or something. Yeah. What if that happened here? What would we leave behind?
Oh, you're talking
Mount Rushmore,
Vesuvian type of
a
event.
Handful of monuments.
Right.
And
they do talk about Yellowstone, that if that chimera, which is bubbling the land at 10 inches up and down every day, that if that goes off, the last time it went off, about 200,000 years ago, they said, it took out about 2/3 of the United States, what is now the United States. And they said at 200,000 years, we're probably a little overdue for an eruption. But it's a huge chimera. What's going to happen if that goes? You can't have it, but you can take it with you and look at it.
It's hard to, it's hard to imagine, somebody in the future or people now that's trying to do the plaster thing with dinosaurs. Digging
us out.
It's flow went as far as Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And that's what they said. We're kind of on the dividing line toward the Mississippi. You're kind of on the dividing line. And everything west of the Mississippi is supposedly would just be wiped out by this volcano, this chimera. And what isn't wiped out, those left would be living in, they said, at least a generation of what would be like nuclear winter.
Yep.
Dystopian.
Well, and it would also depend on the prevailing winds of the time when it actually erupts.
Sure. And so good person to talk to about that would be Marie D. Jones, who's written some pretty good books. Her father was a volcanist, and she's written a bunch of books in the scientific paranormal realm.
Oh, okay.
And she wrote one on the chimera underneath Yellowstone a while back. So, but yeah, to answer your question, what would they find? What would be left of us if in an instant we were destroyed? Or like you said, Sarah, your first example, a comet hit us. What would be left? Who would be left? Depends on where the comet hit, I suppose. That would be a big thing about who is left.
Well, yeah, I mean, if the entire Midwest is, gone, they'll, pretty much take out most of the farming population, and you're covered with new.
Did I say chimera or caldera?
You said chimera, but I knew.
Chimera.
Oh,
Yeah, we
Lucky
knew what you
Smith
meant,
corrected
caldera.
me. And I thought, I must have said chimera again. I do that all the time. I meant caldera, and I knew that. Sorry, guys.
Yeah.
Thank you, Lucky Smith.
Yeah, you
So-
said Pliny the Younger earlier, and it was Pliny the Elder.
The elder,
The
yeah.
pillow on his head.
Oh, I thought it was the younger that went with the pillow on his head.
No, it's the Elder.
Not the elder.
Professor
Younger
Brown.
was the one who documented, what was going on with the volcano.
We actually got a face with Dr. Bauer again. Professor Bauer.
Oh, I
Good
can give you a
evening.
face. It's just not a pretty one.
Well, I got a new face.
Yes, I know,
Lucky.
Lucky Smith. Caldera is a volcano. Chimera is a hybrid of two animals.
Yeah.
So,
So you're talking about some catastrophism.
Or a spaceship.
kinda. Because we were talking about Pompeii a little bit again. So we said, what would be
I mean-
left if we were faced a catastrophe like Pompeii? It brought up Yellowstone, the caldera there. I almost said chimera again. It's just a mental block, Lucky. So don't be too worried. It's a mental block with the word.
Well,
It's
out
Admiral
there,
Thrawn's flagship.
It's like calling my wife Sylvia for no reason at all. I don't know where that comes from.
out there in the Midwest, aside from Yellowstone and
She didn't hear me.
and actually, Sarah, I don't know if you've seen any of this where you're at, but have you heard of the Carolina Bays?
The Bays.
Carolina Bays. Look it up.
Not right off the top.
Are you in Virginia?
Yes.
By the way, I have to say to Lucky Smith, I would like to talk to you some about your work. He says, I'm a biologist. And he said, I've worked with chimera and it's awful. It's a word that triggers me. I'd like to hear more about what you do, brother. So say that again, Dave and Sarah. I cut over the top of you. Sometimes
I just
gotta respond
commented
to
on
these
the fact that
comments.
she's in Virginia.
Oh, you're in Virginia?
Yeah.
So the
my
Carolina-
degree's in biology, actually. So.
Oh. You should
So
have
the-
corrected me.
The Carolina Bays out in your neck of the woods, they're all over the East Coast, but they're primarily through North and South Carolina and into Tennessee and Kentucky. But for a long time, basically what they are is it's a bunch of what appear to be inland lakes or ponds, and they're all in an oval shape, and they're all pointing up towards the Pacific Northwest in their angle of where they are.
Oh, okay.
Randall Carlson and Hancock and a few others have gone over this, and it looks like what they are is bolide impacts from what most likely hit the North American ice sheet, which was some estimates a mile or more thick, and actually is what ended the last ice age. So from a catastrophism perspective, right, our folks over there in Pompeii, they had a bad day. It was just a bad day for everybody, right? But there are
frozen in time.
Just like having your phone smashed.
right.
Just like. So,
but there are all kinds of what looks like empirical data of these regular events that seem to happen in some periodicity, right?
Yeah.
And some cycle.
yeah.
So when we look at, down in South America, up at Tiwanaku and Pumapunku, you see these massive buildings and art infrastructure that was just basically bowled over. They have no idea how, first of all, how the hell these things were built, particularly Pumapunku, but and who is also the mystery. But these things are so massive, and it looks like some kind of tidal wave or some
Exactly.
massive, right?
Yes.
And all we need is, the Jablinsk, which was that was about 4 or 5 years ago, I think now. The one over Russia. These things, they come out of nowhere, just like kind of that, the whole eruption of Vesuvius. People might have gotten some kind of feelings, animals kind of getting freaked because they can sense the change in the telemetry of the frequencies because their systems are tuned to it. And, then there's psychics and people who get the information or, some kind of eerie event warning, right? And I mean, that is in spades right now. I mean, across not only the normie world, if you will, but also across the woo-woo world. And the events
Which
that are
one are
going on,
we?
it depends on where you stick your hat, right?
Yep.
I hang it over here. I'm gonna be one of these folks. I'm gonna follow this information, whatever. And there's all kinds of delineations between them, just like belief systems and everything else. But my point is that what would be left? It depends on what the event was. So and the construction of whatever is being affected, because if you look at the civilizations, the archaeological sites around the world, and then we've got these huge, massive areas of incredible amounts of 10 million square miles in the Amazon, in the Sahara, in Siberia, and there is stuff under there. Look at the stuff they're finding in Central America.
Yeah.
What's interesting is go ahead.
I was just saying, correct me if I'm wrong, Sarah, but I think her question was more, I got out of her question, what would we leave behind? Not what would be left over. It's what would they find of us 2,000 years down the road when they found a way to excavate what was left?
Well, that's exactly what I'm saying.
Our homes, our lives.
It would depend on the event.
There you go.
And it would depend on where I agree. It depends on where the event happened. Look at the big Siberian blowdown that happened. They assumed from a meteor strike, wiped out a huge area, but it was out in the middle of Siberia, so it didn't affect civilization.
Yeah, really. Tunguska. Yeah,
Tunguska. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, and so and I think it's worthy of at least being aware of the potentialities, the possibilities of these kinds of things coming, and whether they're and basically what we're talking about are things that we have zero control over. We're not going to stop a volcano. We're taking out some kind of bolide asteroid comet kind of thing, a la Armageddon. Is like I think we've got some folks with some toys that can potentially do something like that. There's
the most we can hope for in volcanism is to be able to warn people and say you need to head in this direction or that direction or whatever, and hopefully give them some amount of notice.
Well, that's and the thing is, also the major push for trying to get us off planet, trying to get us into.
Well, I agree with that.
Yeah. Right.
Well, I think that may be what happened back on Mars.
Possibly.
Maybe we are actually the Martians.
I am not far from that belief.
I'm not either, believe it or not.
I think St. John had a lot was fairly accurate in a lot of that.
I have my problems with Sitchin. I really do. Mostly because, and maybe this is just my my own bias I've built up. But when I was researching, and I read a lot of his stuff when I was researching for my own books, if you've ever looked up Michael D. Heiser, Heiser, he's a theologian, but he's a Hebrew scholar and an ancient linguist. And the stuff he writes about and speaks about is very in-depth looks at biblical texts and theology in order to say, look, we've gotten it wrong because we haven't understood the linguistics here. Now, he wrote something about Sitchin that really affected the way I felt about Sitchin, and I looked into it. Sitchin said many things that there were available modes to interpret the language he was reading, but he didn't use them. He used his gut feeling on something. For instance, is this, and I remember I wrote about this. He referred to the children of the fiery rockets when he's talking about the Anunnaki, that they were the children of the fiery rockets. And he gets this off of the cylinder seals, the ancient Sumerian cylinder seals. And the problem, though, he uses the word mu in English. It's mu. that which being identified or properly translated means the curved firmament of the sky above your head, wherein the moon dwells, the sun, the stars, and so on. And the reason we know this is there's an ancient lexicon that goes back 4,000 years that tells of some of the different regional languages, and it's a lexicon of words. And Mu is in there, and it means to everybody, it meant the curved firmament above your head.
You know, Scotty,
Well,
I met Sitchin back in Atlanta in the 90s when he came through. And I first got turned on his work in the mid 80s. And I got all of his books. I read his, what he researched and his conclusions. And then in the late 90s, the 2010s is when all of this Sitchin backlash started happening. People are going, you're not translating right.
That's because people started looking into it.
Well, right.
Hey, this is cool stuff. But wait.
At the end of the day, it's all of it's everybody's speculation. Not only Sitchin, but those who are trying to review
let me finish
work.
The
and the thing that I find the most fascinating is here we are 40 years later almost from when I think the 12th Planet came out in 76, so it's even more than that. But literally every researcher in the UFO woo-woo community, they're all quoting Sitchin's interpretations of the Sumerian. They're they're not nitpicking words. They're looking at the totality of the story.
Sure.
And
now I understand.
It's
like I've said about Sitchin. Sitchin might be onto something, but he did some things that are big no-nos when it comes to academic research.
Well, fuck academic research. You know what? That's the point we were talking about last night.
Well, here, let me make my
academic
that I was making.
The entire academic institutions are a bunch of thieves who have decided to hold on. They've gathered the data. They've proclaimed what it is, and therefore, because they say it is, therefore it is. Fuck that. That entire the track record of scientific institutions across the board, not just geology, not just archaeology, paleontology, the physics, all of it. All of these
here's the point I was making.
Spectacularly wrong.
When you look
I'm not going to believe any of them. I'm just going to look at them and say,
of the language that existed.
Who knows that for sure?
Is defined as.
I think you're nitpicking something that is irrelevant.
I don't think it's nitpicking. Let me finish this point.
Okay.
And then you'll see why it's not nitpicking. The point I started 5 minutes ago. Mu is defined as the firmament, the curved arch of the sky, in several different languages.
Mu is also a letter in the Greek alphabet. So
yes,
and it's also some landmass
what
in the Pacific.
Sitchin wrote using the word Mu, he interpreted it as the curved nose cone of a rocket. He didn't, and he said, and this is where he gets
that's what you're going rockets. With, dude. Is that what you're going with? You're nitpicking whether the definition.
I don't think I'm nitpicking at all. I'm saying.
Well, you're saying that one definition sounds like a nose cone to a rocket. The other one sounds like the curvature of the firmament.
I'm not saying sounds like. I'm saying they wrote down 4,000 years ago what Mu meant.
Okay, so let's go with your thought that Sitchin misinterpreted.
It's not my thought. It's not even my interpretation. It's not my
whatever
opinion.
that interpretation is. Let's go with that. So let's assume that Sitchin got that wrong. How does that change the rest of the story?
We don't even have to assume it.
Okay.
But how does that change the Anunnaki and Enki and all that?
Yeah, how does that change anything?
I didn't say that. Because
you said you had a problem.
Frankly, I was in the middle of a point when you wanted to make a different point about it. So what I'm saying is Mu, one of the things, my whole point was one of the things that was a cog in the greater machine of things that had me going, about Sitchin, where my conclusion was he might be onto something here, but he utilized methods that were wrong. Use a Star Trek method. So how did you get the Genesis to work? Well, I did something in the Matrix of it. Oh, so you cheated. Yeah, I did that. And that's why
you can say the same thing about Edison and Tesla. You
could.
I think that
so theoretically for hundreds of years, cows have been trying to point this out to us, and we've just been too thick to understand.
Linguistics is like mathematics.
It's all in the Mu.
if mu being defined in ancient times meant the curvature of the sky, I don't think it's funny. I don't think it's fucking funny at all, because this is how you get to the core. This is how researchers will get to the core of believing one way or another or something.
Yeah.
Sometimes linguistics is the thing. It's like, here, I'm going to drift myself off the point. When I have talked about the famous passage in the Old Testament, the book of Exodus, where Moses sees God in the burning bush, asks his name, I am that I am. And it's like, what the hell does that mean? Well, it is the only place in the Old Testament where you have a Hittite, I'm sorry, not a Hittite, a Sumerian or a not Sumerian. It's Sumerian, might as well be Sumerian, the whole region there, where you have a Mesopotamian wordplay that's being incorporated. That wordplay in Mesopotamian, I am that I am, literally means in Mesopotamian wordplay, I am that Enki they speak of. And but that doesn't come out in the Hebrew translation. So when you look at that, you say, okay, linguistics means something.
Absolutely. I'm a cunning linguist.
What's that?
I said I'm an aspiring cunning linguist.
Yeah, there you go. I'm not aspiring, I'm an accomplished one.
I see.
But the same thing with the mu. When Sitchin says, well, this passage on this cylinder seal is interpreted, the children of the fiery rockets, literally by the definition of the word as it was used 4,000 years ago, means the children beneath the sky. It's the children under the
close enough.
Curvature of the sky.
You look, I could draw an easy analogy to the rocket and to the sky in the interpretation either way.
But that's a hazy analogy. That's not the definition.
Well, I'm looking at the totality of the work. I don't understand that language. I'm not an expert in any way, shape, or form. So I'm relying on people that are doing a bulk of research. And since Sitchin started the whole thing, a shitload of people got in. And my point was, in my observation of the criticism of things like you're talking about from the people who have, wanted to push back his work, it's interesting that here we are now in 2022, and literally every researcher that's done anything on the Anunnaki or any of that mythos is basically using Sitchin's translation of the story.
I don't use Sitchin's translation.
Well,
I look at the Anunnaki. I went and I looked at when I wrote my book, Modern Day Interpretations of the Cuneiform Tablets, where they're mentioned. It talks about them being the Anu. The Anunnaki were a race of gods. He was the god caste like the Olympians were to the Greeks. They were a caste of gods. And, in a quick brush.
You can do, Scotty, you can take that same metaphor, that same analogy, and you can go look at all the Mahabharata, the Rig Veda. You can look at all of the Vedic writings. And these cats, I mean, they get into some serious shit. Physicists, Feynman and Tesla, Walter Russell, all these cats that had these amazing insights into the reality of the energy of the world we live in, read the Mahabharata and the Rig Veda. They were inspired by the stories, let alone the mathematics, because you got Vimanas, you've got mothership Vimanas, you've got aerial wars going on with blasters, and I mean, it is so detailed.
I'm not discounting all of that in talking about. My whole point was, before we went off on it, I lost a little faith in Sitchin when he created the word to mean what he wanted it to mean, as opposed to how it was defined.
How many others are doing the same thing, have done,
doesn't matter to me.
Still doing
it. This was my. It doesn't matter how many others do that. I look at
what I'm saying. It's a norm.
He used the word to push a theory without defining it as it's defined.
But how did any other words? I mean,
he created a new definition.
His narrative just have the same kind of problems?
There are other words, there are other phrases, there are other things that he did.
Does it dramatically change?
On the tip of my tongue, that was.
Does it dramatically change? Does it dramatically change the story and the outcome that he's
what
told.
it changes is his ability to approach it academically. If you are willing to change the existing meaning of a word to fit your argument, then your argument is flawed.
So you think he
he's
did it
not,
intentionally?
He's not pulling that from other places out of antiquity. He just said, well, when it says curve, I'm going to say the curve of a rocket ship, the nose cone of a rocket ship. It's not defined that way 4,000 years ago. It's defined as the sky over your head.
But it doesn't change.
You're not answering my question.
The actual story
I thought I did.
of the Anunnaki.
No. Does it change the narrative that Sitchin laid out?
No, not really. It doesn't change
Okay.
the narrative he laid out, but he's laying out a narrative and including in that narrative, the descriptive part of the narrative, he's using faulty academics.
Well, again, the academics I could give a shit about. Okay.
Well,
That's
it
not
matters
impressive
to me if I'm going to believe what this guy said, if I'm going to look at what he said and go, he's got some great things to say, but I'm just going to ignore the fact that he ignores the language.
Well, I'm not going to ignore that fact. In fact, I listened to all of the stuff that was going on, and when they were shitting on him during the 2010s, and I'm listening, going, "What? Oh, okay. Somebody else is really smart, and they've got their own interpretation of a language. Oh, and here's the guy that's got a little different one. I mean, there was like at least a half a dozen. They were all interpreting things like you're talking about.
The
saying,
thing Sitchin had going for him, though, is that there was an existing lexicon from antiquity.
Okay, so
I define that word.
So
to me, this is like the guys that are ripping apart Jefferson now.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, maybe. I don't hear a lot of people ripping apart Sitchin. I hear a hell of a lot more people going right along with what Sitchin says, and I always have. I've only heard a couple of people, and I was intrigued by the fact that there was somebody who is well versed in ancient languages that said, look, this language, that means something different than what he's saying it means, which is very interesting. Now, it's
how many interpretations, and you've gone on about this.
It's that mode that people get into to say, if it's a pet thing that I like and I want to believe this, then I'll accept that misinterpretation. But if it's something we don't want to believe in, we're like, what do they
Scotty,
know?
this sounds to me like the same argument that you make about your problem with the current biblical translation, right? The King James. And I mean, I've heard you go on about, these guys, they changed a bunch of shit. English. But they did it scholarly and with academic protocols. That's all bullshit.
See, yeah, but when you can drill the King James full of holes for its use of language.
Translations, exactly what we're talking about with Sitchin.
But did King James offer a lexicon of the way we speak in 1611? This is what this means?
No, but I can tell you that the words they used are not the accurate words.
That's right. I mean, the entire Bible is a reinterpretation.
King James Version.
The entire Bible is a reinterpretation over hundreds of years with hundreds of people from stories that were mined and mangled and manipulated from thousands of years before that. I mean, it's been through so many iterations. And of course, each time it was God who was making that interpretation. But apparently he likes a whole bunch of different of the factions within the Christian or Judeo-Christian model, because you got the Baptists, which ain't going to talk anything.
Well, of course, with the Bible, you're talking about 66 books written by different authors, compiled how many times, rewritten how many times.
Exactly.
With the word moo, you're looking at one word that was defined that way.
And an ancient bring it back in.
That's why I stick with the Quran.
There you go.
So, but I mean,
how do we know the Quran isn't corrupt?
A book that shouldn't have been written. No offense, but he said, "I don't want this written down." And 100 years later, they said, "Hey, we should write this down."
Yeah.
I mean, everybody, all of the domains of the context of reality we float around in have got these authors at different points in times of ideas and society. I mean, you can throw in Marx and Nietzsche, and I mean, all the stuff that's been current, and now what's even going on. But if you go back thousands of years, all of these stories repeat. It's the same.
Yeah.
There's a theological or a biological, meaning a bloodline control over that which is in any given fiefdom, area, border, whatever. Hell, it could be your own ranch out in the middle of nowhere. But there's always the same theme. There's either strife or something that goes on within the family, usually among the siblings. Occasionally get the parents involved. Shit happens, and there's all this strife and struggle. Could move it up to a little community, a little civilization. If you don't have somebody that's kind of keeping it in check, it will uncheck itself, and it will become a problem. Same thing that we're seeing with all of these different societies and cultures and civilizations have been the result of somebody saying, here's our code of conduct.
Right.
Here's the way in which we will conduct ourselves amongst ourselves. And in that way, then we can all, have a really comfortable, nice existence when everybody takes their role and executes their responsibility for the community.
Contract.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that's either driven by a theological, some kind of belief system, or it's driven but can be by itself some type of bloodline or some kind of reverence to, somebody who conquered something, and they are then, because of that, they are now given the responsibility, the deference, the duty to execute leadership.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's going to come in all kinds of forms and fashions.
You're talking about a huge topic, though.
Oh yeah. I'm just using it as
a word.
I'm just trying to give a broader context. Pull back, zoom out.
Right.
50,000 feet.
And I'm not that far away from you on any of that. But I have certain things. There are certain people I try. If you came out with a great theory and I agreed with you, and then I look into your work and I find out that you've used faulty academics to reach your conclusion that you're putting out to other people. By faulty academics, I mean, I'm not talking about faulty philosophy, because philosophy
you
all over the
purposely,
board.
intentionally did something that was
if you
not
intentionally
correct.
Changed something to match your theory. Here's a good example. There's a guy out there I know that is an Egyptologist. He's much more learned in Egyptology than I am. He's a PhD. But he had a theory about the Exodus and Moses. And he didn't like the fact that none of the 5 existing chronologies of the kings of Egypt matched his theory. So what did he do? There were 4, I'm sorry. What did he do? He created his own. And so he went through and said, I'll just create a new chronology. And he said, well, we're going to do this and do this with the timeline and this king. Instead of 30, we're going to make him ruling 28 years. And you do that enough times, you end up with whatever it might be. And so he actually, and most Egyptologists I know, pretty good people. My own friend, Dr. Ailing, said, yeah, we just kind of laugh at him behind the scenes. He said, because he's making up his own shit to prove his point, rather than going with what is established historically.
Yeah, see, like I've said 3 or 4 times, the establishment does not impress me anymore. Anybody with a stamped piece of paper or
use a different word than establishment then.
Well, academia, whoever the authorities, whoever the people are that have been given said authority to claim this is the way or this is what this is. All of that, all of the experts, anybody with expert at the end of their name or any kind of doctorate, whatever, have quote unquote experts. Their track record has been shot. There is nothing in any one of the disciplines that has anywhere near the modicum of credibility that it should, because it's been hijacked for a lot of different reasons and it has by a lot of different people. So anything that is official to me,
so how do you get to the bottom of deciphering what is or is
I do my own research.
That's what I did.
I've lived
I
long
found out
enough.
the
And
word
I've looked
moo
at enough.
meant
I've
something
lived.
different than what he defined it as.
Well, everybody has done something like that at some point. I
Sure.
think that the overall story, what the timeline is, what are the results, what have they done, what is the empirical shit that I can put my hands into, wrap my mind around, and chew on it to figure out how I'm going to digest it, because that's all any of us can do. Everything is speculation. There is
Sarah
nothing
was
that
going
has
to
been defined.
interject something in there.
Well, I was just saying that it's a matter of integrity of what you choose to take in and choose to accept as true.
Mhm,
So because we all do make our suppositions and whatnot, but we're not at a point where we have to stand on other people's shoulders, other people's works in order to move forward, because we can't constantly reinvent the wheel just to just to try and move forward. You have to prove 1 + 1 = 2 before you can work on advanced physics every time.
And the
So we
easiest
have to
place to
stand
start.
on the shoulders of
Well, 1 +
other
1 doesn't
people.
equal 2 if you have a different theory.
Right.
Well, and this is the thing. We have to look at everything objectively, and everything has to be re-examined, because in order to determine what you're looking at, you've got to get as much information about it as possible.
Sure.
And you have to do it with sans any wrappers of other people's notions. You got to take all that shit away, and you have to look at just fundamental metrics. How do things work? How have they worked? What doesn't work? And now what should work?
And my point about language is there are fundamental metrics that you can use. It's like another good example. In the Old Testament, it talks about how Cain, after murdering his brother Abel, he goes east to the land of Nod, takes a wife, builds a city, and calls this, after having a son who he names Enoch, he builds a city and names the city after his son, Enoch. Well, over the time, and I looked into the linguistics of this, I read a very interesting article on that particular topic. Enoch was, maybe it's the other way around, Uruk, I think, was the name of the city. And the U became the EN in the passage of time as language morphed. U became EN. The R was fit in there between the N somewhere. Well, the word Uruk became the word Enoch in later pronunciations and later spellings. And so, or it's the other way around. I'm sorry. Enoch became Uruk because Uruk, and then Uruk is the same base word as Iraq. And so a lot of, and Sarah, you might know something more about this. I'm assuming you might because you're Islamic, you're Muslim, and so you might know something of some of the Middle Eastern names and the words. But there was a big linguistic breakdown of how that word that Cain used to name his son and to name the city actually became something different through the passage of time and the morphing of.
Yeah, I mean,
but you can find it. It's there. It's there to be found.
Yeah, you can. Even, but every time you translate from one language to another, it's like we were saying earlier, something is lost. So if you in the Arabic language, there you have a lot of back of the throat kha sounds, which you don't find in English. Form different words. So I mean, it's not an apples to apples.
What does that mean? What does that mean, by the way?
No, there's several letters in the alpha in the.
I thought you were studying
the back of the throat sounds. The like and lan, that sort of stuff.
Have you heard the Dutch or the Scottish?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, they be hacking and gacking all the time.
From Arabic to English.
Yeah.
So I mean, if you look at in Arabic, Moses is Musa.
Musa, yeah.
Musa. In English, it's Moses. And in different otherwise, Jibril is Gabriel. It's some things are lost and found in translation. So I mean, and I think that's also a point of contention of what we were discussing earlier about that loss of integrity of what things mean, because right now we don't have a universal dictionary or translator of this means this and this means this. You can't make any apples to apples
Exactly my point.
comparisons. You may have certain words that mean different concepts. Like that word for in what is that German word? Schadenfreude. We don't have an apples to apples
Right.
apples translation of what Schadenfreude is. We say Schadenfreude is I think it's the concept of someone enjoying someone else's pain or something like that.
Yep,
So,
right.
Yeah. Right.
Joyce said something about let's not go to the tribal, barbaric, ancient, tyrant, mythical god. I'm not sure what comments we were making that brought you to that, Joyce. I'm not sure what you're talking about there. I don't think any of us here, well, maybe Sarah does. I don't want to speak for Sarah. I know Professor Bauer and I, Dave and I, we have ideas about God, but none of us are convinced about, I think, who that really is, what story is really true. And we have different paths that we take, and we mold and morph our own way. Now, to me, that's philosophical or theological difference. Which is a different thing than mathematics. It's a different thing than linguistics. Linguistics,
those are totally different fields. But as
thing.
you're molding and morphing into other way, it's the same concept that you were talking about earlier with Hitchens. The whole molding and morphing. Are you saying it's acceptable in the spiritual, in the religious realm, but not in the realm of numbers or the realm of art or whatever area that you're looking at, linguistics? I mean, I think it's difficult because as human beings we want to make everything the same, which it's not.
Right.
In which we look in what we choose to accept and what we don't choose to accept. I mean, and if we go to we go to Professor Bauer's point, then if we try to take in everything, try to understand everything as it is, every single it's like just accepting every single idea regarding a concept as being true, what's the polar opposite and every shade in between. Mm-hmm. Not only will our heads explode because we don't have the brain capacity to process all that at the same time, but we are forced to if we're going to go by what we consider as logic, if we're going to use the methodology of logic, then there's naturally going to be areas in which there's going to be filtration. You're going to filter, okay, it's not this. I mean, is God a giant sparkly purple potato in the sky flying in the air?
Probably
or
not
is
a
God
potato.
in someone?
That's my theory.
Right. Or is God, something that is innate within people, or is it a foreign body somewhere in the sky? Right. I mean, it's hard to reconcile, those two concepts.
Well,
everybody
Sarah,
has their own interpretation.
You and I hail from very dogmatic source points.
Right.
Islam is very dogmatic. Christianity is very dogmatic. Now, I wouldn't call myself a Christian right now anymore. I'm an agnostic, if I'm anything.
Right.
Because I have no real knowledge about what it really is. And so you're probably closer to, did I freeze up or did the whole thing freeze up? There we go.
Yeah, you're
but you get my point.
Yeah, I could hear you fine. It was just a screen.
So anyway.
So yeah, I mean, if we existed in the area, around the time of Christ or even prior, we would probably we could be polytheists. You know what I mean?
Sure.
We could have polytheistic.
I think a lot of them still were.
Even or agnostic.
I actually think the Old Testament lays out a pretty good case for polytheism, even though, and I'm not going to get into it right now. I've talked about it on this show before. I think when you talk about the gods and the Elohim and all of you got a pretty good case for that. Might have been a whole symphony of God. Symphony is not the word I'm looking for.
And it's specifically to the Elohim, because I've done my own little bit of research and YouTube videos and all that. Even for the word Elohim, the gods surrounding that particular area, they all sound similar to Elohim.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
So
El was the base word in
El,
the
yeah.
Canaanite region
Yeah.
for God.
There's El,
Joyce
there's
says,
An,
we
and
are
Anu,
the
yeah,
gods.
Anu, and yeah, all that stuff. So I
Joyce
mean,
said, we the gods, we the fractals of the God, we are all fractals of the creators. Funny, right? No, I don't think that's funny. I might agree with you, but I have no proof of that. That is what we manufacture to understand.
And that's
that
my
is
whole
our
point.
etiology of theology. Go ahead.
but what is
Everything,
proof? Yeah.
everything that is considered proof
Mhm.
has been defined as such by those who have the authority, who have been gifted the responsibility to do that.
And who are they to tell us?
Yeah, everything that I look at, everything, there is at least a 50-50 mark that happens where, yeah, this sounds like it makes sense. And then another 50% is like, it's either doesn't make any sense. Your answers are so bizarre based on what you've said here that I need to see your question. Your question has produced that kind of an answer. And this is across the board. It doesn't matter what knowledge domain, scientific discipline, whatever you pick.
Sure.
Everything is now up for grabs for questioning and self-examination and re-examination, especially with the new tools and technologies and thoughts and things that we have. We may be on an average across the sleeple, as I refer to them.
Sure.
That they're really not that dumbed down, couch potato chip creatures. They are actually have more capacity and capability than they've been exposed to and been hidden from. You start getting into the mystic arts, the mystery schools, all of the information that's come out of has been corralled and made available finally to the masses. That information of awakening to the self of what we actually are and looking at all of our history and going, whoever wrote that shit, yeah, they did it on purpose. Yeah, they did it for nefarious and whatever reasons. But all of that's wrong. All of our history is wrong on many different levels and many different degrees.
Yeah, I think that's too dogmatic a statement to make. I don't think we can say all of our history is wrong. I think that there are lots of things.
I will change my opinion when I get proof.
Okay.
Right now, there is no
Where
proof.
you get like an ancient lexicon.
Well, I was just going to say, I don't think all the history is wrong. I think it's only been wrong for about 5,000 years.
Well, there you go.
So
and the stuff before that is where all the real juicy stuff is.
There it is.
So what does it mean for you to have proof? Say you get your proof. What then?
Well,
what does that proof mean to you?
So it depends obviously on what it is and how it relates to me and my resonance and my interest and my attraction, my curiosity, my imagination about it. It would depend on all kinds of variables. For example, I didn't know that you could create and manifest physical things and see immediate transformation until I was in the church. And I saw people that were certainly possessed. This was no act. I saw broken legs get straightened out, spoken tongues, did all that stuff. And I was convinced that the Pentecostal interpretation of the King James Bible was the source of this magic that I was witnessing. Until I got into it and found out, oh, it's not that. The events are real. The energy is real. But the interpretation that I was given of it was highly manipulated.
See, we Baptists marked and avoided you. You Pentecostals.
Well, my point is
that's what they did.
You don't know anything for sure until it resonates. I'm trying to answer Sarah's question with a long-winded rant. You have to be able to have the sense of self, and what is not the typical word of knowledge is really important. The more knowledge you got, the better you're going to be able to deal with whatever comes along. So
I agree with that.
I'm a big fan of get as much of that to your point, Sarah, about your head exploding. If you left everything opened it all up and looked at it and went, holy shit. Well, you have to know that going in that that's probably what's going to happen, because there's so many obvious bizarre things that we all see, that we've all experienced over the last 50, 60 years in my case. And I look at it and I go, what was the explanation for that again? Oh, yeah. So that you were wrong then. Where are you at now? Oh, you've changed your mind. You've corrected, whatever it might be. And I'm just using that as in hyperbole.
Excuse me.
But the ability to have gnosis, the origin of the word knowledge, is really what one seeks. And going back to the whole word thing, well, gnosis, the actual definition is not just knowing something, but you feel it in your bones. Okay, that's the resonance of whatever it is you think in your mind that you know, and you know it with that gnosis feeling. You were talking about language earlier, and we have the word student, right? And when we think of that word, we see kids getting on a bus with backpacks and lunch boxes and going in and out of school and sitting in class and that kind of thing, because that's the way we grew up with it. Well, in the Japanese, in kanji, there's a word for student is called ka, K-A. But it's a much deeper meaning than what we imagine the term student. So ka is translated into English as student. Well, ka actually means a student of something.
So if you were a researcher writing a paper on something, and you said, I want to use the Japanese word, and you're writing about the Japanese, and you end up saying, well, they said a student does this, when in fact, what you have to, excuse me, can we be quiet with that over here, please? Somebody's having a temper meltdown over there. That's why I'm not paying attention to it. If you were to write about the Japanese student, you would say, now, in the English, it simply means student. But in the Japanese, which I'm writing about, it has a much broader meaning, or a much deeper meaning.
Yes.
It's like I used to say the Koine Greek in the New Testament. It was a logical language. It was one that you could read in the English. I'm just making this up. You could read a passage that says the sky was dark. But in the Greek, it might say if you go back to that language, and you know this, you studied this stuff. Koine Greek might not say dark. It might say, it might mean intensely, palpably cloudy and dark, which interprets in the English as the word dark.
And this will bring us back to Moo.
And it brings us back to Moo. It will bring us.
I mean, the word gnosis itself, you're using that as your standard instead of saying logic. It's, or your basic whatever.
Hold on a second, guys. You keep talking. I'm going to mute my mic for a second.
Say that again, sir. I'm saying gnosis.
Well,
instead of
gnosis
logic,
or resonance is what you're using as your standard against whatever information you're being thrown at.
That I want to have or
accept, or you choose to accept as your method of searching and research.
No, well, it's one of the tools. So I'm a big proponent of first principles thinking, which is really getting to just the nut of the nugget. It's kind of bizarre, because Descartes created all kinds of problems with this whole reductionist model. And that still permeates the main scientific models that are used in all these different disciplines. But first principles is getting to the nut and really examining it for what it is. And then you zoom out, you see what's been added and all those good things. Yeah. So logic and first principles and critical thinking are my weapons of choice in the wall of the web and the information that we have. So with gnosis is that part of our consciousness, in my opinion. It's a habit, it's a nature of consciousness. And so our bodies feel, and our consciousness, the energy there, or however you want to define it, that makes us who we are, that animates us with our personality, our histories, and all that good stuff, spirits, souls, whatever you want to call them. The biological connection between consciousness the connection between consciousness and your biology is your mind. The mind is where all the magic is. The mind is not in the brain. The brain is it's a neurological organ. And we happen to feel and think that that's where our mind is, but our mind is all of us because in our entire being.
It's similar to what you see in the Greeks in the concept of of the essence, boiling things down to the essence.
Yes.
So,
Yeah,
I mean, because you can have so many permutations. Like, say, you have a if you wanted a tree, you can get a tree from a seed. You can get a tree from an acorn. You can, multiple different sources. You can take a graft and get a tree, but I mean, it's still in essence a tree.
So I mean,
that's the plight of the physical versus interacting with the essence of being. I mean, essence of being. I think it was in Plato's Republic or maybe Socrates or something. It's either Plato or Socrates. I forget which one.
I have to say too, some of the conversation that's going alongside of this in the chat room, where Susie, you just said, not if we're gods. It skipped on me. There's going to be many gods on the other side. And my first reaction to that would be, how do you know that? Did somebody come down and reveal that to you, or that's just what we think? And Susie, I'm not picking on you because I do the same thing to things that I come up with. Same things, friends that I come up, people I respect, like Professor Bauer, respect him immensely. That doesn't mean I'm not going to question him. He's not going to not question me. And I would say, that's a great thought. What's that?
That's where the fun is.
The fun is in this.
Right.
But that's where I would ask anybody who says something like, we're all gods and we're all going to be together on that side. I go, well, isn't that kind of like saying Jesus has saved us all and we're all going to heaven? We'll all see each other on the other side. Just a different version. So we have all these versions of things that we choose to believe, but what do we really know for certain?
That's the thing. That's my whole point. Everything is speculation.
That's why I rely on things like linguists or mathematics or things like that. I like to rely on those things that it's like you can't change 1 + 1 equaling 2.
And you know what's really fascinating, and you know this because of your work in Egypt and the historical stuff you've done.
Yeah.
But there's two common themes throughout all civilizations so far that we've seen. One is literacy, a language. The other is numeracy, right? Having there's some kind of math, some counting or something that goes on for each one of them. And that numeracy gets wrapped into the literacy as well. So when you think about how powerful the literacy, they create letters so that they can make words, so they can make sentences with these letters, and then they all have sounds, right? So an individual letter can one symbol, whether we think it's a letter or not. There's that saying of a picture's worth 1,000 words. Well, the symbol is worth 1,000 pictures, because symbology, and this remember you were talking something about this. It made me think about this earlier, Sarah. Symbology is one of those things where this whole interpretation issue is either really, really strong or it's really, really vague. Because symbology is not only we find provenance, or what we think is the predicate for a particular symbol or that means something. We can see that in one culture, and then we can see it in a totally different one, and we really are not sure if the only thing we're sure of is they look the same. Okay,
that's it.
Outside of that, there's a whole bunch of speculation about what it may mean in their civilization and the context of their culture, and which we don't even know. I mean, Easter Island is an example of just like, what the hell went on there?
Yeah. And
most likely, in fact, I just saw new research where they had done a dating on, how we see the heads on Easter Island, and then we dig down and they're like 30 feet down.
Yeah.
And they're these giant statues. Well, they analyzed the soil, and they determined that it was natural soil deposits. These things weren't buried. So if that's the case, then the amount of time it took for that soil to build up takes these things back a lot longer than what they've been
thousands of years.
Right.
Right.
And then that means, okay, well, if we go back to the Ice Age, at the end of the last Ice Age, roughly around 300 to 400 feet of the oceans were that much lower, 300 to 400 feet down. That means there's millions of miles of coastlines where people most likely live, because that's what we do. We live next to water, right? We set up encampments and all of that.
Look at Australia as a perfect example of that. It's this huge continent, and almost every city is on the coast.
Exactly.
There you go.
Everywhere.
We've got to kind of wrap this. And before we do, because I have to go, before we do, I just want to say to Susie, she's been kind of conversing with me a bit in the chat room. I would say that doesn't answer my question. Because what you've said, and no offense to you at all, Susie Q, I don't mean any problem by this. That's not a fact you're presenting me. That's an affirmation. You're giving me a soul-felt affirmation, which is fine. If that's what you believe, that's fine. Believe that with all you've got. But I'm saying your belief in that is just like somebody else's belief in something else. It doesn't qualify it or quantify it. What you're telling me and what you're saying,
unless it's my belief. If it's something I believe,
that is a. You say I'm not chained and definitely not to a cross. That's your choice of theology. That's not a fact. It's a fact that you believe that. But as your belief system, this is where I would ask you. I would ask Professor Bauer. I would ask my wife. I would ask Dave Potter. I'd say, you claim this belief, but you don't know that. You know it because you believe it. I was in the same place in the Baptist church for a long time in my life, until about 25 years ago. I believed everything with vigor and in my heart because I knew it to be true, because I believed it. Faith from being told. There's no facts in the Bible. That's bullshit. I'm sorry. I'm going to say that right away, Susie Q. You know why? Because the Bible's full of facts. It might be full of theological holes, but it's not devoid of fact. The Bible has efficacious facts in it, efficacious history in it.
Except for the things that nobody can prove. Nobody can prove the crucifixion. Nobody can prove the parting of the Red Sea.
Well, that happened.
Nobody can prove any of that.
You can prove some of those people existed. You can prove Pilate existed. You can prove
we've got
the
data
story
on pieces and parts, but I mean, that's the thing, is that that's why I use that method that I laid out. Gnosis, to answer your question, Sarah, I use Gnosis as a part of that process. And then when Gnosis kicks in, that's really a good indicator that I'm on the right track.
This is just really, really depressing. Because, I mean, if everything is just supposition, then what's the point? What's the point of it all? Yeah.
Well, it depends on your belief system.
And I agree. And belief systems, like Susie Q's got her belief system. I've got mine. You've got yours. Sarah's got hers. And there's a million others. Joyce has hers. And Dave's got his. I forget you're there, like, I don't see your face.
Sarah, it sounds like it comes from a position of not having a sense of purpose. I mean, the one thing that we all seem to do is we have a purpose to do something.
I think it comes from not having definitive proof. That's the thing. You can prove archaeology, history, Susie just said. Yeah. I think the Bible's full of archaeology and history that's been proven archaeologically. I didn't say you could prove it theologically. I think they've wrapped a lot of faith stories around real history. And a lot of that's been, we talked about biblical archaeology last week, or earlier this week.
Okay, so going back to Sarah's first question. What will be left?
Done. Before we start a new topic.
I'm not starting a new topic.
I gotta go.
I'm going back to answer Sarah's question, her first question.
Okay, go ahead.
What will be left? So if what is left is a series of Star Trek and Star Wars tales, will they think in 2,000 years that we had those abilities and lost them somehow?
Maybe.
with everything that's been recorded in the last 20 years,
Yeah.
I mean, there's more data on how messed up we
Could you
are than
imagine
in
somebody
any
finding
time in
this
human
dead
history.
planet and going through all the, being able to tap all the data that exists from the last 20 years? What
Like
would they
finding
find
all the
about
films
our
and books
civilization?
on Star Wars and Star Trek.
Yep.
I
Susie, you're
kind
right.
of
It is
go.
a theological discussion.
I kind of go with Richard Hoagland's premise that Star Wars is our past and Star Trek is our future.
I can see that.
One can hope.
I can see that.
So, but before we go, do you have
Yeah.
any idea what you're going to do for tomorrow?
No.
May I suggest angelic meetings?
Angelic meetings. You can suggest it. Write me up a proposal and
All right.
submit it to me. I don't know what
Friday.
I'm going to do yet tomorrow. I've got ideas bouncing in the back of my head.
Okay.
I generally don't decide those things unless I'm in the
Yeah,
midst
until
of a
like an hour
series.
before.
Yeah, unless
that's
I'm in the middle of a
not true,
series
Scotty.
that I'm
That's
carrying
not
on.
true. That's not true. You decide and then you change your mind
I do that a lot.
all the time. And it's
Does
like,
it really
well,
matter
I-
what the topic is going to be
I
on
know
the
the
poster?
topic said
Because
we
we're
were
going to
gonna
talk about
the
something totally different.
eschatological
That's right.
Antiochus Epiphanes and how he ties into the King of Tyre. But I found this really cool article on ghosts.
I think you should just call each episode Intelligent Talk and just throw whatever you want on the table and let it rip.
That's it. And that's some of the best shows are just doing this. Maybe we'll do this tomorrow night for the show.
Do a cabin
know?
for the show?
Let's get us all just do the captain's cabin from the beginning for a Friday night.
Well, we can certainly fill dead air.
Yeah.
We can fill dead air. And we can kill live air too sometimes.
That's right. We can
Yeah.
kill
So-
that too.
Everybody
That's true.
who's been here tonight, who's in the chat room, I love you. I
And there were a
appreciate
lot
the
of
fact that
you.
You're here. Susie Q, because I called something you said bullshit doesn't mean I think you're full of bullshit. All right. That's just arguing
love you,
to
Susie.
have fun with talking about it. So everybody come on back tomorrow night. Maybe we'll do this all through the show. There won't be an actual topic.
I'll
We'll
bring
just
the
throw
aspirin.
topics out on the table. What's that, Sarah?
I said I'll bring the aspirin.
You bring the aspirin, and I'll bring the scotch. All right, guys. I'm gonna let
Maybe
the
I'll
three
call
of
in
you
from the
go.
motorhome and we'll just do it all on scotch.
There you go.
Now you got my attention.
Yes. All right, guys.
All right, everybody. Long
see
and
you, Sarah.
prosperous.
Thanks for
Live
being
it
here
well.
tonight.
Be
We'll
well,
see you tomorrow
everyone.
night.
Do something good for someone.
Dave, I love you. Professor Bauer, I love you. I can't say that to Sarah because I don't know her well enough to say that to her. I love what she represents and what she does and says. But you two, I respect you both highly, and I love you both, and I love arguing with you. So
It's
all
not
right.
argument. It's not argument if you have respect.
Yeah.
There it is. There it is.
It's just
discussion.
it's just a good
discussion.
rollicking discussion. And
There it is. I
give
love
the
that.
little ones a hug for me because they're both
I will.
in turmoil
I've
tonight.
been saying for 15 minutes I'm going to get off of here because stuff is not settled. So I want to go help settle down some things.
All right.
So,
Love 'em
all right,
both.
you guys. Love you.
Well, love
Have a good
Peace, my
night.
brothers. Thank you.
See you later. Thank you. All right, guys. That's it. That's all we got. Yeah. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. So you all have a good night, and I tomorrow night. And until then, live long and prosper.